Why is it frozen? Because everything is broken. Wasn't it working just like 5 seconds ago? No. It's just on here that it's frozen. That's fine, because I don't need it to have my whole face anyway. That's fine. This is exactly how I'm going to have it anyway. Alright, anyway. The other stream that I had, I cut short. Well, I didn't cut it. My computer did, because it decided to freeze and it decided to break. So, that was fun. I mean, it was fine. I was talking nonsense anyway. I didn't really have anything interesting, profound, fun, or what have you to say. So, it was all good in the hood. So that's fine. But work's over. It's time for bed. And I figured I'd give myself a bedtime story before I go to bed. So I'll read a couple of chapters of Battle Royale. And this is actually keeping me to task on reading, because, we've already read 100 pages of this book. So, doing pretty well. I mean, there are like 600 pages in this, because I guess this is like, well, I mean, the book was obviously first, but I guess this is like like both movies or whatever it would be, not just the first movie, but like it would be, the book would be both movies itself, like in like not just the first one, but like the first and the second one. I would assume, because I mean, there's already, oh, we're already down to 34 students, so we're done with those, because I can't read with my glasses on this close. You like my bookmark? Aren't they cute? I love them so much. They are precious. Also, my reading buddy, do you see her? Oh, the webcam's not attached. Oh, that's fun. Hold on, let me see if I can get it to attached. No? Oh, alright. If the webcam's not attached, it's not attached. Whatever. So, it's fine. But my reading buddy. I mean, the webcam was attached. I don't know what to tell you guys, so either way, whatever. There's picture, there's audio. Everything seems to be working as of now. Except for all of this nonsense, but that's the only way that it would work, because when I tried to put it on just my face, it wasn't working, so that's okay. We're going to do this. So now you have this and that. So that's the cover of the book. And we're on chapter 12. Yay, us. Water handy. I only paid $17 for this book when I got it. Maybe even less, because I have, a rewards card. But anyway. Chapter 12. On the northern edge of the island, opposite Kiriyama and his family, a steep, towering cliffside plunged into the sea roughly 20 meters below. The small clearing atop the cliff wore a crown of wild grass. The sound of crashing waves came carried Carried up by the rocky face, their midst drifted. Holy fuck, Sorry, my whole brain was just that sentence for some reason. Wow. Okay. The sound of crashing waves came carried up by the rocky face, their mist drifted in the breeze. Bathed in moonlight, Sakura Agawa, girl number 4, and Kuzuhiko Yamamoto, boy number 21, sat side by side at the edge of the grassy cliff, their legs dangling below, Sakura's right hand resting gently on Kazuhiko's left hand. Their day packs and belongings, including their 2 compasses, were scattered around them. Just as Kiriyama had told the others to meet him at the southern tip, Kazuhiko had given Sakura a scrap of paper that read, "At the northern point, next to the words, 'We will kill each other.'" That he had not chosen the same location as Kiriyama was a bit of a good luck, and no matter what else would happen next, they at least had been able to talk alone. A .357 Magnum revolver was tucked into Kazuhiko's belt, but he didn't think he'd be using it now. "It's peaceful here," Sakura murmured. Her hair was cropped quite short for a girl, and her profile traced a beautiful outline from her high forehead down to her sideways glimpse of a gentle smile. She was tall and slender, and she always sat up straight. When Kuzuhiko had finally arrived, the couple had shared an all too brief of an embrace. In his arms, she had trembled like a wounded little bird. "Yeah, it is," Kuzuhiko said. Aside from the bridge of his nose, which was slightly too wide, he had a handsome face. He turned away from her and faced ahead. The open sea remained pitch black in the moonlight, dotted with silhouettes of islands even darker, and a large landmass beyond, which Kuzuhiko thought must be the Honshu mainland. It was not quite 3:30 in the morning. Lights floated in the darkness, where all of the 3 different people in the peaceful slumber, though some may have been students his age, up late studying for their high school entrance exams. Not so far away, yet a world beyond their reach now. Kazuhiko shifted his attention a little closer and saw the small black dot roughly 200 meters away. It must have been one of those ships Sakamochi said would shoot anyone who tried to escape. Even at night, the Seto Inland Sea bustled with nautical traffic, but on this night, the lights of sailing ships were nowhere to be found. The government had likely prohibited all passage. The sight, the sight gave Kuzuhiko the chills, but he tore his gaze away from the black dot. When he'd left the school, he saw Mayumi Tendo and Yoshio Akamatsu's bodies, and on his way here, he'd even heard far off gunfire. Now that the game had begun, all that would continue to the end. He'd talked to Sakura about it a little before, but none of it seemed to matter anymore. "Thank you so much for these," Sakura said. She was looking at the tiny bouquet of tiny flowers in her other hand. Kazuhiko had found them along the way and picked a few he liked. White clovers, or something like that. The bundle of white petals like cheerleader pom-poms atop the airy stems. The flowers didn't make for a particularly impressive bouquet, but they were all he could find. Kazuhiko flashed her a grin. "Thank you very much." She remained looking at the flowers for a time, then said, "We won't be able to go back together. No more walking through town together. No more eating ice cream together." "That's not," Kazuhiko started to say, but she cut him off. "There's no fighting it. I know that too well. I heard that my father tried to oppose the government's methods. Then one day," through her hand, Kazuhiko could feel her trembling. "Police came. They killed him. They didn't have a warrant or anything. They didn't say anything, but just came in and shot him dead. I can remember it. I was in our tiny kitchen. I was still small. I was sitting at the table. My mother held me tight, and I grew up still eating at that same table." She turned to Kazuhiko and said, "There's just no way to fight it." They'd been dating more than 2 years, and he'd never known. She never told him about it, not even after they'd first slept together in her house the month before. Slept together. Sluts. Ugh. Aren't y'all in middle school? Kazuhiko knew there had to be something else he could say, and all he could muster up felt incredibly trite. That must have been hard. Sakura surprised him with a smile. "You're so kind, Kazuhiko. You really are. That's why I love you. I love you too. I love you so much." Kazuhiko wished he weren't so young and inarticulate so that he could explain how he felt. The effect that she had on him, her expressions, her words, her movements, so tender, her soul, beautiful and perfectly pure. How important her very existence was to him, but he felt unable to express it. He was only a ninth grader, and worse yet, one with really low marks in Japanese. Anyway, she said, closing her eyes. She took in a breath, more composed now, and let it out. I wanted to make sure that I got to see you first. Kazuhiko remained quiet, listening to what she had to say. Terrible things are going to happen. With what you told me, they're already happening. Yesterday, everyone was friends, but they're killing each other, aren't they? Through her hand, Kazuhiko could feel her shudder again. She gave him a smile, and mixed with emotion, fear, and maybe a little irony at the senseless fate that they had visited them. I can't take it, she said. Not that. Of course she couldn't. Not someone as compassionate as Sakura. Kazuhiko didn't know any sweeter girl. Besides, she continued, we won't be able to go home together. Even if by some miracle one of us could go back, it wouldn't be together. Even if I somehow survived, I couldn't take you being gone, so she didn't finish the sentence. Kazuhiko knew what she had been about to say. So I'll die, here, with you here before anyone else can interfere. Instead, she said, but you will live. Kazuhiko smiled sadly, squeezing her hand tight, and shook his head. That's cruel. I feel the same as you. Even if I survived, I couldn't take you being gone. Don't you go and leave me alone. Sakura's wide eyes stared into his, and she began to cry. She looked away from him and wiped her tears with her hand, holding the clover bouquet. Then she said something that took him a little by surprise. Did you watch it last week? You know, the one with Wednesdays at 9? The last episode of Tonight at Our Rendezvous? Kazuhiko nodded. Rendezvous was the drama broadcast by the DBS commercial network. As would be expected from a show produced in the Republic of the Greater East Asia, it was a shallow love story, though fairly well made for its flaws, and it had been a rating hit for years. Yeah, I saw it. You kept telling me I should. Uh-huh. Well, you know, she went on, and as Kazuhiko listened, he thought, this is just how we always talk. He found such bliss in their ordinary, pointless chatter. She wants us to be us through the end. Before he knew it, he was on the verge of tears. Totally fine, Sakura was saying, with how the two main characters ended up together. That's how it always goes, you know. But I don't like what happened with Miki's friend, Mizu, the one played by Anna Kitagawa, and how she gave up on the guy she loved. I would have gone after him. Kazuhiko grinned. I thought you'd say that. Sakura laughed bashfully. Can't hide anything from you. She sounded so happy. I can still remember when I first saw you, on my first day in junior high and in your class. You were tall and cool, but more than that, I saw you and I thought, here's someone who could really understand me. Deep down, he'd understand me. I I don't know how you say this very well, but Kazuhiko twisted his tongue around inside his mouth and thought for a moment, then said, I don't know how to say this very well, but I felt the same way, I think. He had said it well. For a while he leaned against Sakura. With his left hand still holding hers, he reached his right hand to her shoulder. Sitting together like this, they kissed. The moment lasted a few seconds, or was it half a minute, or an eternity? Then their lips separated. They had heard rustling in the bushes behind them. Someone had come. That was their signal. The train's about to depart, so all aboard, you'd better get moving. There was nothing left to say. Sure, they could have fought back. He could have taken his revolver in hand and faced whoever they were. But that wasn't what she wanted. She wanted to pass quietly before she got sucked into this damn senseless massacre. Nothing was more important to him than her. He couldn't trade her for anything now. This was what her trembling heart wanted, and he would obey. If he were a little more eloquent, perhaps he would have thought, for her principles, I offer my life. Their bodies fell through the air beyond the cliffside, the pitch-black sea at their backs, their hands still clasped together. Yuki Utsumi, girl number 2, was peeking out from the bush, her breath caught in her throat. She hadn't the slightest intention of harming anyone, at least not unless somebody attacked her first, and had never imagined her sound would have signaled their departure. She could only stare in stunned silence as the best couple in class, their two bodies side by side, vanished from the grassy cliff's top. She could hear the faint sound of waves crashing against the sheer cliff below. A gentle breeze blew. The tiny white clovers had spilled from Sakura's fingers and came to rest upon the grass. Behind Yuki, Hakura Tanazawa, girl number 12, asked, "What's wrong, Yuki?" Yuki heard her, but she just stood there trembling. 32 students remain. Damn! They just swan dived off that cliff. Ugh, that sucks. Chapter number 13. Ugh. Megumi Ito, girl number 3, sat in the dark, arms wrapped around her shins. Like I said, as I read the book, I remember shit that happened from like the manga and the movie and stuff. So I am remembering like certain things and I'm like, oh yeah, I kind of remember that. So forgive me if I have like a look of aha on my face as I'm like, going through it because I kind of remember some things. So, all right. Megumi Ito sat in the dark, arms wrapped around her shins. Her small body trembled. She was inside a house on the outskirts of the island's only village, a cluster of residences along the eastern shore. Through the lights might seem Though the lights might still seem to have been working, Megumi didn't dare find out. The moonlight coming in through the kitchen window didn't reach under the table where she hid, leaving her in near total darkness. She couldn't see her watch, but figured she'd been sitting there for 2 hours, which made it nearly 4 in the morning. Almost an hour had passed since she'd heard the small and distant burst of what sounded like fireworks. Megumi didn't want to think about what that noise really was. She lifted her face and saw the moonlit shapes of the tea kettle and cupboard above the kitchen counter. Megumi knew that whoever had lived here must have been sent away to some temporary housing, but she could still sense their presence in the home. It felt unnatural and creepy and reminded her of an old ghost story she'd heard as a child. The one about the crew of Mary Celeste, who had suddenly vanished, leaving behind an old abandoned ship, everything in mid-use, meals and all. When she left the school, Megumi ran, unaware of where she was going. The next thing she knew, she had ducked into a village. Her first thought was that not many of the others had left before her. 5. Only 5. With 50, maybe 60 buildings in the village, she could fly into one of them with hardly any risk of running into anyone. Once inside, she could lock the door and hold the fort, as it were, and remain safe, at least until she was forced to move by one of those forbidden zones. The exploding color made for an oppressive presence, but there was nothing she could do about it. If you try to force it loose, it'll explode, Sakamochi had said. What mattered now was not to miss the scheduled announcements of where and when the forbidden zones would activate. Megumi had tried to enter the nearest house first, but it was locked. So was the second. And the third, she used a rock to smash the sliding door around the back of the home. The loud noise sent her instinctively scrambling beneath the veranda to hide. No one seemed to be approaching, so she went inside. With no way to lock the back door now, she struggled with the heavy storm doors on the outer rails, but managed to slide the panel and close. Plunged into total darkness, the house felt sinister, more haunted mansion than home. Megumi turned on her flashlight to search the house and found 2 sturdy fishing rods to jam the store doors shut. Now she was under the kitchen table. I can't kill anyone, she thought. There's no way. But maybe, just maybe, if this wouldn't be a forbidden zone until the end, she had checked her map and seen that nearly an entire village lay within zone H8. I might be able to survive. But, Megumi thought, her body still quivering, it's so terrifying. The way the game is, everyone's my enemy. I can't trust anyone. I know that. But I just can't make myself think that way. That's why I'm stuck here, shaking like this. But even if that time comes and the final whistle is blown, and I'm still alive, that would have to mean everyone else is dead. My friends, like Mizuho, and Kaori, and that boy. Even thinking of him now, that makes my heart race. Shuya Nanahara. In the darkness, Megumi pulled her knees to her chest and sat thinking of Shuya. What she really loved about him was his voice. It was a little gravelly, not too high pitched, but not too low. He seemed really into that band music, rock or something. And when he had to sing songs praising the government of the leader in the music class, he always had this displeased look on his face. But even then, his voice was remarkable. And with his guitar, he could improvise rhythms like nothing she'd ever heard, and they made her body dance of its own accord. Yet there was a grace to the sound, the beauty of the church bell's resonating ring. He had long, wavy hair, the Bruce Springsteen look, he'd said, though Megumi hadn't a clue who he meant. kind, double-lidded eyes. Sometimes Megumi thought he looked cute, like a cat's, and the agility of the former Little League MVP. Thinking of Shuya's face and his voice, her trembling subsided. How nice it would be if Shuya were here with me now. But, but why did I never tell him how I felt? I never sent him a love letter. I never had him meet me somewhere so I could tell him face to face. I didn't even tell him over the phone, and now I never will. A thought caught her attention. The phone. Sure, Sakamochi said we couldn't use the phones, but what if? Megumi scrambled for her nylon handbag, which she'd left near her day pack, and pulled the bag closer. She opened the zipper and shoved aside her clothing and toiletries. Her fingers felt the hard, squarish object and pulled it out. It was her cell phone. Megumi's mother had bought it for her in case something happened on the school trip, though this was hardly just something. Sure, she'd envied the couple of kids who had had one, and there was a thrill to it, like having her own secret passageway. On the other hand, she wondered if her parents were being overprotective, and though her mother worried too much, and besides, what did a junior high kid need with one of those things anyway? Oh, back in the day when having a cell phone was, something super, fancy and it was like a luxury and not something that literally everyone needs in order to survive. Like when you go without your cell phone for 5 seconds, it's like, what the hell? Literally just saying that made me be like, oh, I need to check my cell phone, make sure that I'm not missing anything. Because, God forbid we don't go without our cell phones for more than 5 seconds. Absolutely had to make sure that my cell phone was doing a thing. All right, anyway. So she had stuffed the shiny new phone into the bottom of her purse, completely forgetting about it until this very moment. With shaking hands, she flipped open the phone. The device switched automatically from standby to dial mode, and the dial pad and tiny LCD screen sprang to life with the dim green light. Green light. In the glow, Megumi could see her own legs and skirt and her bags too, but more importantly, there on that screen was the unmistakable icon, the antenna and bars. A signal. Please, God, Megumi whispered. Impatiently, she pressed the numbers for her home in Shiroi. Why does that word kill me? Shiroiwa 08792. She pressed the phone to her ear. Silence, then ringing. Hope swelled up in her chest. 1, 2, 3. It's only 5 numbers. One ring, 2, 3. Hurry. Answer. Mom, Dad, I don't care which. I know it's the middle of the night, but you know your daughter's in trouble. Hurry. The receiver clicked to life, then the voice came. Hello? Oh, Dad! Still cramped into the confines of the kitchen table, Megumi closed her eyes. She felt like she might go mad from relief. I'm saved. I'm saved. Dad! Delirious, she shouted into the phone. It's me, Megumi! Oh, Dad, save me! Dad, come save me! But when there was no response, she regained her senses. Something is wrong. What? Why isn't Dad... Wait, what's going on? Finally, the man on the phone spoke. I'm not your dad, Ito. This is Sakamochi. Didn't I tell you that phones won't work? With a yelp, she dropped the phone, then clawed forward on the ground, mashing the buttons to end the call. Her heart pounded, and despair crushed her chest once more. It didn't work. Of course it didn't work. I'm going to die here. I'm going to die. But the hammering in her heart was about to be sent leaping to a whole new level. She heard the sound of breaking glass. Her head jerked to face the noise's direction, the living room. She'd checked it earlier to make sure everything was locked. Someone's here. Why? Of all the houses, why this one? Hurriedly, she snapped shut the faintly glowing phone and stuffed it into her pocket. From atop her day pack, she drew her weapon, a double-edged diving knife, from its plastic sheath and gripped it tightly. I have to run, quick as I can. But her body remained frozen. All she could do was quiet her breathing. Please, please, God,
Make sure that they can't hear my heartbeat. Megumi heard a window open, then close, and then the sound of cautious, quiet footsteps. The footsteps seemed to wind their way through the house until finally approaching right outside the kitchen where Megumi hid. Her heart pounded louder and louder. A flashlight's thin beam pierced into the room. The light glided above the kitchen counter and the tea kettle and pots. The intruder sighed and said, Good. No one's here. The footsteps entered the kitchen, but Megumi had already been stricken with panic at the sound of the girl's voice. Gone now, smashed to pieces, was any hope that the intruder was one of her good friends and that she could talk her way out. The voice belonged to none other than Mitsuko Soma, girl number 11, the worst girl in the entire school. Mitsuko wore a lovely, angelic face but could make teachers wither under a single glance. Even with all the rumors that surrounded Kazuo Kiriyama and Shogo Kawada, Megumi was the most afraid of Mitsuko Soma. Maybe it was because Mitsuko was also a girl, or maybe it was because one of the other girls in Mitsuko's clique, Hirono Shimizu, had picked on her when they became classmates at the start of 8th grade, tripping her and walking past her in the hall, ripping her skirt up with a box cutter. Hirono had long since interested in her, though Megumi had still been sad to learn that the same class would carry over to 9th grade, and Mitsuko herself had never bullied her. Nevertheless, Mitsuko was someone not even Hirono could defy. Someone like Mitsuko Soma, Megumi thought, would enjoy killing me off. Megumi's body began trembling again. No, of all things, stop. Don't shake. If she hears. She squeezed her arms tightly around herself, striving to subdue her shaking. From underneath the table, Megumi could see Mitsuko's hand holding the flashlight and an illuminated band of skirt near the girl's waist. Then Megumi heard the sound of Mitsuko rummaging through the drawers below the sink. Hurry up. Please, just hurry up and leave. And at least get out of this room. Wait, that's it. I could run to the bathroom. I can lock the door from the inside and escape through the window. Just please, please leave the kitchen so I can. Ring! Ring! The sudden electronic chirp sent Megumi's heart nearly leaping into her throat. She thought she saw Mitsuko Soma jump too. Immediately, Mitsuko's flashing went dark, and with it, her skirt. Megumi sensed the girl retreating to the corner of the room. When she realized the ringing was coming from her pocket, Megumi frantically took out her phone. Her mind went blank, and she reflectively flipped the phone open and jabbed randomly at the buttons. Ah, this is Sakamochi, said the phone in the voice. Listen, Ito, I wanted to add that you'd better turn it off. The phone, I mean. If I were to call you, it would give away your position to everyone, wouldn't it? Right. So you should. Megumi's fingers found the end call button, cutting off Sakamochi. Silence, suffocation continued for a while. Then came Mitsuko's voice. Megumi? Is that you? Is that you, Megumi? Are you there? Mitsuko seemed to be in the corner of the dark kitchen. Megumi quietly placed her cell phone on the floor and clutched her knife. Her hand shook even more, and the weapon seemed to fish like a fish, trying to wiggle free from her grasp, but tightly, tightly she gripped it. Mitsuko was taller than Megumi, but she couldn't have been much stronger. Whatever her weapon was, no. What if it's a gun? No, if she has a gun, she'd been firing in her direction. And if it's not a gun, then I have a chance. I have to kill her. If I don't kill her, she'll kill me. If I don't kill her. With a click, the flashlight beam reappeared. The light shot beneath the table, blinding Megumi for a moment. Now, stand up. Stick the knife at the light. But something unexpected interrupted her thoughts. The beam of light fell low, and into Mitsuko sank, dropping to the floor, gazing at her, crying. From trembling lips, Mitsuko breathed out the words, Thank goodness. She was sobbing. I was so scared. She extended her arms, Megumi as if reaching for a salvation. She wasn't holding a weapon. Her hands were empty. She said the rest in one breath. It's you. It's you. I don't need to worry, right? You wouldn't kill me. You would never do something like that. And you'll stay with me, won't you? Megumi was stunned. Mitsuko Soma? That Mitsuko Soma? She was crying. She wants my help? Oh. Her tremors melting away. Megumi felt welling up inside of her a lump of emotion that was hard to describe. So that's it? Oh, so that's how it was. No matter what names people called her, no matter what the rumors, Mitsuko's just another 9th grade girl like me. How could she ever do something so terrible as to kill her own classmates? The girl was all alone, frightened out of her mind, but how could I? I thought it, didn't I? I thought to kill her. I'm an awful person. Emotions filled her, both self-disgust and at the same time, relief at having someone with her and not being alone anymore. Teardrops began to fall from her eyes. The knife trembled from Megumi's fingers. She crawled out from beneath the table and took Mitsuko's outstretched hands. As if a dam had burst from inside her, the words spilled out, passionate. Mitsuko! Mitsuko! She felt herself trembling again, but because of a different emotion now. But what does that matter when I. There. It's all right. I'm here now. I'm with you. We're together now. Yes, yes, Mitsuko said, scrunching up her tear-streaked face. She squeezed Megumi's hands in return. Yes, yes. She nodded. There, on the kitchen floor, Megumi embraced her. She could feel Mitsuko's warmth, and the girl helplessly trembling body pressed against her. Her feelings of guilt redoubled. I thought terrible things. So terrible. I was going to kill her. Hey, the words came unbidden from Megumi's lips. I. What? Mitsuko looked up from her with tear-filled eyes. Megumi pressed her lips tight to stifle her own sobs and looked ahead. I'm I'm so ashamed of myself. For a moment there, I was going to kill you. I thought I'd kill you. I was so scared. Mitsuko's eyes flicked wide, but she didn't become angry. With her tears still running down her cheeks, she simply bobbed her head. Then with a grin, she said, It's okay. It's okay, really. Don't be upset. It's not a big deal. It's natural. It's a screwed up situation like this. Don't be upset, okay? Just stay with me, please. Mitsuko lifted her hand and gently held back the back of Megumi's head, then leaned until they were touching cheek to cheek. Mitsuko's tears ran down Megumi's face. Oh, I was wrong about everything. To think Mitsuko Soma has been so kind-hearted all along. Here I was going to kill her, and she forgave me with two little words. It's okay. Isn't that what Mr. Hayashida thought, though he's dead now, always said? Never judge people by rumors. Only people with ugly hearts do that. Again, she felt emotions welling up inside her chest. She held Mitsuko tight. That was all she could do for now. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I was an ugly person. I really. She heard a sound. Shh, like a lemon being sliced. It was a very pleasing sound, right out of a TV cooking show. A sound only the best, newest knife with the freshest fruit could provide. Today, viewers, we'll be making salmon and a lemon marinade. It took a good 2 or 3 seconds before Megumi realized what had just happened. Just beneath her chin and to the left, she saw Mitsuko's right hand, and the blade had extended out from it in a gentle curve like the shape of a banana, casting a dull reflection of the flashlight's beam. A sickle, like for reaping rice, and at the end of it, in my throat. Her left hand still cupping the back of Megumi's head, Mitsuko drove the sickle deeper with another shh. Megumi's throat felt fiercely hot, but it didn't last long. Unable to speak, she could only feel the incredible warmth on her chest as the blood streamed down. And then she didn't feel anything. She was gone before she could place any meaning to the blade inside of her throat. Without a final thought of her family or even Shuya Nanahara, Megumi died in Mitsuko's arms. When Mitsuko let go, Megumi's body crumpled sideways to the floor. Mitsuko didn't hesitate before switching off her flashlight and standing up. Annoyed by her tears, she wiped them away. Mitsuko could cry at a moment's notice. That was one of her many special talents. She held the sickle up by the moonlight that trickled in from the window and wiped the blood from the blade. The falling blood drops splattered softly as they hit the ground. Not bad for a start, Mitsuko thought. She'd intended to look for something easier to wield, a kitchen knife perhaps, but this sickle wasn't as bad as she'd expected. She'd just been a little too careless inside that house, not knowing if someone else was there or not. The next time she'd be more cautious. She looked down at Megumi's corpse and murmured, Sorry about that. I was going to kill you too. 31 students remain. Sometimes when I have like two girls in the same scene, I know I hear it, I'm like, what voice did I give her? And then it's like, did I give her this voice? And then it's like, I think I just went into the wrong voice. It's like, oh well. She has this voice now. Part 2. The Middle Game. Chapter 14. 31 students remain. I don't know what minute we were on. Sorry, just trying to double check, make sure everything's working there. Okay. Anyway, chapter 14. The first night broke into dawn. She and Anahara looked up through the trees and watched the blue sky gradually take on white. Leaves and branches of evergreen oaks, camellias, that's a plant, I guess, and some cherry trees and other you couldn't identify, wove an intricate net concealing where he and Noriko hid. Shuya had checked his map, which confirmed the island's rounded diamond shape and indicated two mountains, one on the north and one on the south. Shuya and Noriko were near the foot of the northern mountain's western slopes, and just a little south relative to its peak zone C4. C4, according to the coordination grid. The exceptionally detailed map included not only the topographic contour lines, but also each house in the village and around the island. These were marked with light blue dots. Various buildings, only a few earned the commonly recognizable icons: a medical clinic, a volunteer fire station, a lighthouse, while the rest were places like the community center, the fishermen's co-op, and the like. And streets, big and small. Between the lay of the land, the roads, and the occasional scattered house, she had been able to find sparings. Moreover, while he was fairly high up on the mountain during the night, he had double-checked what the map was indeed a faithful representation of the island. The silhouettes of islands of many sizes dotted the dark blue sea, and, as Sakamochi had said, the outline of the guard ships due west, stationed with its lights off. Directly to Shuya and Noriko's west, the thicket terminated at a steep slope. A small field opened below, beyond which the downward slope continued toward the sea. Passing through the field during the night, they had found a building, almost a shack, which had been built off the ground. She had noticed the weathered wood torii gate 10 meters away and figured it to be a small, very small Shinto shrine. The map confirmed this. The front door stood open and no one was inside. But as he had done with the other houses they'd come across on the way, he decided not to hide inside the little shrine. One of the others might have the same thought, and with only one entrance, if someone were to notice them, they'd be trapped. When it was time to rest, she found a place relatively near the ocean, where the undergrowth parted with just enough space for both of them to lie down. Higher up the mountain, the greenery would have been thicker, but he had the feeling that many of the others would end up converging there. And if the two encountered someone who turned out to be an enemy, and they had to run, he figured it would be better to do so on more level ground, especially with Noriko's wounded leg. Shuyu was sitting against a tree, about 10 centimeters wide. Noriko was just to his left, also leaning against a tree, with her injured right leg stretched out in front of her. They had pushed themselves through exhaustion, and Noriko had closed her eyes. Even after lengthy discussions over what they should do next, they hadn't come up with much. His first thought was to find a boat to escape the island, but he quickly realized that would have been pointless. The guard ships were at sea, but more than that. Shuya touched his hand at his collar on his neck and felt its cold surface. He'd gotten used to the feel of it against his skin, but the weight of it remained, an embodiment of the senseless fate that bound them. That was right. The collars. A specific signal transmitted by the computers inside the school would trigger the bomb inside the collars to explode. When Sakamochi had explained the rules, he said it would happen if any of them entered a forbidden zone. He said it would happen if any of them entered the forbidden zone, but nothing prevented the same from happening to students who attempted a seaward escape. Those guard ships weren't even necessary. Even if she managed to find a boat, escape would be utterly impossible unless he could do something about their collar. Then it followed that their only move was to attack Sakamochi at the school and disable the collared locks. But the school in Zone G7 had been designed as a forbidden zone directly after the game's beginning. Even if they could approach it, they were being tracked anyway. Shu was turning this over in his mind when he noticed the word around him becoming bright. Moving about in the daylight would be dangerous. We just have to wait it out until the next nightfall. But that thought led to another problem, the time limit. 24 hours without a single death, Sakamochi had said. The death Shuya witnessed as he left the school had been more than 3 hours earlier. If the day passed with no more killings, then they would all die in a little more than 20 hours. Waiting until night to prepare an escape would be too late. Ironically, each classmate's death brought the other more time to live, but Shuya didn't want to think about that. For now, damned if he did, damned if he didn't. They were all damned. Shuya kept hoping he could somehow meet up with Shinji Miyamura, a guy with Shinji's extensive knowledge and the boundless wisdom to use it. He surely would be able to find a way through this situation. He also kept on regretting, despite this risk, that he hadn't waited for Shinji after Yoshi Akamatsu's attack. Did I really do the right thing? Had there really been any chance that some enemy would strike? Hadn't Akamatsu only been an exception? No, I can't be sure of that. There might still be trouble yet. I can't even tell who the bad guys are. Who's thinking straight and who isn't anymore. But in this game, maybe we're the ones who have lost our senses. Are we the crazy ones? She felt like he was losing his mind. All that's left for now is to wait here a little while longer and see what happens. Maybe I'll think of something. If I don't, then we'll wait until nightfall and find Shinji. But can we find him? Sure, there's only a small island, only 6 kilometers around, but finding someone here won't be easy. Once night comes, how long will we have until the game is over? Even in the, I hate to think it, 1 in a million chance I find Shinji, or if Noriko and I escape on our own, we'll only be criminals unless we defect to some other country. We spend our whole lives on the run. And then one day, some agent of the government guns us down in a deserted alley. A bloated rat comes out to nibble at my fingers. Maybe I'll be better off, maybe I'd be better off insane. Then she thought about Yoshitoki Koninobu. He was saddened by Yoshitoki's death, but maybe the boy had actually been incredibly lucky to have been spared this mad reality. Mad and without hope. Should we just kill ourselves? Would Noriko agree to a double suicide? Shuya turned his head and for the first time studied Noriko's profile in soft, burgeoning light. He noticed her well-shaped eyebrows, the gentle curve of her eyelashes on her closed eyes, and her lovely nose with the rounded tip, her full lips. She was a very cute girl. He thought he understood how Yoshitoki had liked her looks, but now that face had been smeared with sand, and her hair hanging just below her shoulders were in tangles. And there was that collar, the ugly silver band coiled around her neck like she was in a slave in some long time ago. This bullshit game is spoiling her beauty, Shuya thought, and with that he felt a sudden surge of rage that brought him back to his senses. I won't let this beat me. I'm going to survive, and I'm going to make these fuckers pay for dumping us into this game. And not just pay. You come at me with the right cross, and I'll smash you with these fucking baseball bat. Noriko's eyes blinked open, and she met his gaze. For a while they stared at each other. Then quietly Noriko asked, "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Well, I was thinking." Being caught staring into her face and had taken him off balance. He blurted the first thing that came to him. "Okay, this might sound weird, but you're not actually thinking of killing yourself, are you?" Noriko looked down. Her ambiguous expression might have held a hint of a smile. He could see her clearly now. The sun was rising. Then she said, "Of course not. Although, although." She appeared to think for a moment. Then she continued, "Well, if we were the last two alive, I might want to kill myself. That way, at least you would." Taken aback, Shia shook his head. He shook it hard. He'd just brought up the subject on impulse, never expecting that kind of answer. "Don't talk that garbage," Shia said. "Don't even think it. We are in this together until the very end, no matter what. That's final." Noriko smiled and reached out her hand, touching his. "Thank you. Look, we're going to survive this. Don't you ever think about dying." Again, she gave him a little smile, and then she said, "You haven't given up." He shook his head, putting a little force into it. "Of course not." With a little tilt of her head, Noriko said, I've always thought of you as having a positive force about you." "A positive force?" She grinned. "I can't explain it very well, but it's like you have this drive towards living. Right now it's your determination to survive, and she turned towards him, soft smile. That's what I really like about you." Embarrassed, she replied, "I think that's just me being an idiot." Then he said, "If we find a way off this island, well, it's not like I have anyone. I mean, I don't have any parents, but you have your mother and father and your brother. You won't be able to see them. Can you handle that?" Another smile. I had already accepted that as soon as this started. After a moment, she added, "But what about you? Will you be all right?" "All right with what?" "That you won't be able to see her." She gulped. She knew all about him. She'd said it herself. "I've been watching you for so long." He'd have been lying if he said it didn't hurt, and for as long as he thought of no one but Kazumi Shinitami, but now he'd never see her face again. He shook his head. That's he'd been to say He had been about to say that it was just a one-sided crush, just his own delusion, but he was interrupted. The sudden blare of Sakamochi's voice resounded all around. 31 students remain. Chapter 15. And a pause for a second, because I'm going to eat a granola bar, because my stomach is growly. Hold on a sec. All right. I am back. Back again. Chapter 15. Good morning, everyone. It was Sakamochi's voice. She could tell where the loudspeakers were, but the words came loud and clear, if distorted and metallic. The speakers must have been distributed throughout the island. This is your instructor, Sakamochi speaking. It's now 6 a.m. How are you all doing? Shiya grimaced, though only after he'd recovered from being dumbstruck by Sakamochi's cheerful tone. All right, Sakamochi said. I'm now going to announce the names of your dead friends. I'll start with the boys. First, number 1, Yoshio Akamatsu. Shiya thought that Yoshio Akamatsu hadn't been dead when he left, so after that, he wondered, did he try to kill someone else and then get killed himself? Or could it be, had he remained lying there unconscious until that first forbidden zone activated and his lovely little collar blew him to bits? Since Shiya had been the one to knock him out, the idea didn't sit well with him, but the names of the dead piled into a heap that buried his thoughts. Continuing on, number 9, Hiroshi Koronanaga. Number 10, Ryuhei Sasagawa. Number 17, Mitsuru Numai. Number 21, Kazuhiko Yamamoto. And let's see here. The girls, number 3, Megumi Ito. Number 4, Sakura Ogawa. Number 5, Izumi Kanai. Number 14, Mayumi Tendo. The list of names, of course, meant that the time limit would be postponed for the near future, but such thoughts were far from Shiya's mind. He felt dizzy. The faces of the classmates whose names had been read formed and vanished in his mind. They were all dead, and for each one there'd been a killer. Unless, that is, they had committed suicide. This game is happening. There's no stopping it. Shiya saw in his mind a long funeral procession, a crowd all dressed in black, a man in a black suit with a somber, know-it-all expression that said, Oh, it's Shuya Nanahara and Noriko Nakagawa. That's right. You two haven't gone yet, have you? But look over here. Those are your own graves that you have just walked past. We already carved in your seat numbers, both 15. Don't worry, the carving's free. It's on special. That's a good pace, Sakamochi said. Your teacher is very proud. Right. Next up are the forbidden zones. I'll be giving the sectors and times. Take out your maps and follow along. Still in shock at the number of the dead, and still disgusted at Sakamochi's tone, Shuya nonetheless took out his map. First, an hour from now. That's 7 a.m. From 7, zone J2. Get out of sector J2 by 7 a.m. Got that? J2 was located next to the west of the island's southern tip. Next, in 3 hours, from 9, sector F1. F1 was the same western shore as Shuya and Noriko, but much farther to the south. Next, in 5 hours, from 11, sector H8. H8 included nearly the entire village on the eastern shore. That's all for now. Now, I want you all to do your best today. Sakamochi's broadcast clicked off. None of the forbidden zones were near the pair's current location. Whether or not the areas were, as Sakamochi had said, selected at random, it seemed Shuya had made the correct choice by not escaping into the village. But this place might be included in the next set. He mentioned, Noriko said, and Shuya turned to her. He mentioned Sakura and Yamamoto. Yeah, Shuya caught in his throat. Do you think they killed themselves? I don't know. But I'm sure they were together to the end. Somehow, somewhere, they were able to meet. Shuya had himself seen Sakura leave Yamamoto a note, but anything after that amounted to nothing more than wishful thinking. They could have been killed in separate places by separate crazed classmates. Banishing the lingering image of the two lovers' hands touching as that note passed, Shuya took out the class roster from his pocket. The sheet had been in the day pack along with the map. Though it seemed vulgar, he had to keep track. He took out his pen, intending to strike through the names, but he couldn't do it. It was just too, well, it was too cruel. Next to the names, he drew a small check mark. He did the same next to Yoshitoki Konnonobu and Fumimiyu Fujiyoshi's names. Shuya felt as if he had become the black-suited man next in his vision. Okay, and you there. What size coffins are you? If you can make do with a Model 8, it's a big seller, and I can give you a steal. Be that as it may, Shuya noticed that on Kiriyama's 4 lackeys, 3 of them were dead. Hiroyoshi Koranaga, Ryuhei Sasagawa, and Mitsuru Nomai. The only one left was Sho Tsukikawa, kind of weird kid that went by the name Zuki, and Kiriyama himself. Shuya thought back to Nomai's smug expression after Kiriyama left the classroom. Shuya had assumed that Kiriyama would surely assemble his gang to escape. But what did their deaths signify? Had they gotten together only to be possessed by paranoia, turning their meeting place into a battleground? And had Kiriyama and Sokiko Suki Tsukioka Tsukioka whoa Tsukioka Tsukioka, that name is killing my dyslexia. Tsukioka, I feel like it's on the tip of my tongue to get it right. Tsukioka managed to flee and were fucking Christ. Tsukioka and Kiriyama still together. Shuya had no idea. Something completely different might have gone down, and there was still a faint noise, something like gunfire, that had reached his eardrums. If it had been a gun, had it taken the life of one of those 10 kids? Just then, his thoughts were interrupted by a rustling sound. Noriko's expression had gone visibly tense. Shuya stuffed the pen and paper back into his pocket. Shuya listened closely. The sound continued, and it was approaching. Under his breath, he told Noriko, "Quiet." Shuya gripped his day pack, thinking they needed to be able to move at any moment. He had gathered up all of his things into the backpack. He left some clothes into his gym bag, but those could be left behind. Noriko had done the same with her possessions. She hoisted the 2 day packs over his left shoulder and lent Noriko his hand to place her to stand up. They crouched side by side. She withdrew his knife. He held it in the reverse right hand grip, but then he thought, sure, I know how to use a guitar pick, but will I be any good with this? The rustling grew louder. How close is it now? Within meters? The anxious impatience he felt in front of the school again gripped his mind. He grabbed Noriko by the arm and pulled her back. They stood and backed into the underbrush. Faster. We need to move as fast as we can. They came out of the bushes that had shielded them and emerged onto a trail. The footpath wound up the mountain slope overhead. Treetops sandwiched a blue ribbon of sky. Shuya shielded Noriko behind him as he retreated several meters up the path. In the bushes, the rustling continued, growing louder until Shuya's eyes widened. A long white cat popped out from the undergrowth, filthy, scraggly, with matted fur, but nevertheless a cat. Shuya and Noriko looked at each other. Breaking into a grin, she said, "A cat." Shuya returned her chagrined smile, as if only now just noticing. The two cat looked their way. It stared at them for a while, then pattered up to them. While she was putting the knife back into its sheath, Noriko crouched down slowly on account of her injured leg and offered her hands to the cat. It jumped into her hands and nuzzled her feet. She cropped, she cupped its front legs and lifted the little animal. She puckered her lips into a kiss and held them out towards the cat. "You poor thing, you're so skinny." The cat opened its mouth into a happy meow. "I wonder if it belongs to someone," Noriko said. "It's so friendly." "I wonder." The answer to that is yes. Because a feral cat, one who has never been around people before, would not jump into your arms like that. That cat has been around people. The government had evicted the island's residents to stage the game. Since each program operated in secrecy until its conclusion, the locals probably hadn't been given a reason. Noriko might have been right, and this creature might have been left behind without its owner. No houses were nearby, but could it have wandered all the way up to this mountain? Yes, cats can go very far in a very short amount of time. They have at least a 2 mile radius of their hunting grounds when they're like even house cats. House cats that like go out occasionally have a 2 mile hunting radius. So yes. Um as Shuya thought about this, his eyes drifted from Noriko and the cat. He turned his head, then he recoiled. A mere 10 meters down the path, a figure in a school uniform stood as if glued to the spot. He was roughly Shuya's height, with a muscular build that had been forged on the handball court. Um, Dark, suntan skin and short spiked up hair. He was Tatsumichi Oki, boy number 3. 31 students remain. Chapter 16. Following Shuya's eyes, Noriko turned. In an instant, her expression was tense. Which was he, she wondered, an enemy or not? Tatsumichi Oki stood there staring at them. Shuya sensed his field of vision narrowing in response to the threat, as it did when he rode in a speeding car. But at the periphery of his awareness, he perceived the larger hatchet at Tatsumichi's right hand. Almost without a thought, Shuya reached for the knife in his belt. That set it off. Tatsumichi's arm jerked, then the next instant he was charging straight at them. Shuya shoved Noriko, cat still in arms, into the bushes. Tatsumichi was already within reach. Shuya quickly raised the Dapax to catch the hatchet's blow, but the bag split open, spilling their contents to the ground. The blade struck Shuya's bottle, sending water spurting, and continued through to Shuya's arm. His skin felt ablaze, sizzling. He discarded the sliced up bag and jumped back to create some distance. Tatsumichi's expression had turned hard, and his eyes were wide open, the whites forming a full circle around the black pupil. She was in disbelief. "I know how things are here." For a second, I suspected him too, but why? Tatsumichi was always so cheerful and carefree. Why would he do this? Tatsumichi glanced at the side where Noriko had fallen into the bushes. Following his eyes, she looked over at Noriko. Her face and lips were frozen under the attacker's gaze. The cat had already bolted into hiding. Yeah, that cat wasn't sticking around. Tatsumichi suddenly turned his face to Shuya, and the hatchet was swinging sideways. Shuya jerked the knife free from his belt, taking it into his reverse grip, and met the blow. Unluckily, the weapon hadn't left its uh, leather sheath. Even so, he halted the hatchet strike with a resounding clang. Its edge stopped 5 centimeters from his cheek. Shuya could make out the blue ripples on the blade's surface forming when the steel had been tempered. Before Tatsum, Tatsum, whoa, Tatsumichi Before Tatsumichi could swing again, she had dropped his knife and took his hold of his opponent's hatchet arm. But Tatsumichi powered through another slash. Though slow, the hatchet made contact with the side of Shuya's head. Several strands of his long wavy hair tore loose and fluttered in the air. He felt his earlobe tear open. It didn't hurt much. A blithe and incongruous thought ran through his mind. Well, all kinds of guys get their ears pierced. Shinji did. Tatsumichi switched the hatchet to his offhand, but before he could ready another swing, Shuya kicked the inside of his leg. Tatsumichi's leg dropped. Yes, down. But Tatsumichi didn't drop. He staggered into a half turn, then fell against Shuya, backing him into the underground on the seaward side of the path. Branches snapped all around them. Shuya kept moving back, pressed by Tatsumichi's brute force. Shuya practically ran backwards. Noriko's face was disappearing into the distance. In this unusual situation, another inappropriate thought entered Shuya's mind, a memory from the Little League practice. Let's hear it for Shuya Nanahara, the backwards running champion. Suddenly, the ground felt different. Then she remembered the steep slope down the field with the tiny shrine. I'm falling. The two tangled boys rolled down the bush covered slope. The clear morning sky and the green foliage spun and around and around. But he had both hands around Tatsumi's wrist, and he didn't let go. She felt like he was falling an incredible distance, though it might only have been about 10 meters. I don't know how far that is. With a thump, he came to a crashing halt. He was in bright daylight. They had tumbled all the way into the open field. He was flat underneath Tatsumishi. I have to get up, Shia thought, before he does. But instead, he hesitated. Something didn't feel right. Tatsumichi's full powered machine press of one arm now lay limp and motionless. When Shia looked up from his position under Tatsumishi's chest, he saw what had happened. Directly above his head, the hatchet was lodged exactly halfway deep into Tatsumishi's face, and half of it outside of his face looked like a wafer of chocolate garnishing a Christmas cake. The blade entering through his forehead split his eyeball cleanly in two. Ew. Blood and some vicious fluid were pouring out, and its steel glimmered pale blue in the captivity of his gaping mouth. While Tatsumishi's hand held the hatchet, Sakamichi was gripping that wrist. From Tatsumishi's face to Shia's wrist, a trembling and creepy sensation raced to the speed of light. As if tracing alone the course of the sensation, Tatsumishi's eye oozed all the way down to the hatchet to Shia's neck. With a low yelp, Shia released the boy's wrist and scrambled out of from underneath him. Tatsumichi's body flopped over, faced up, his face gruesome in death, soaking in the morning sun. Shia gasped for air, his shoulders heaving up and down. Dull waves of nausea came swelling up from the path of his stomach. Though the unrivaled horror of Tatsumichi's death visage had certainly had its effect, Shia was far more distressed by himself. He had killed someone, and not just anyone, but someone who had until yesterday been a fellow classmate. Shia tried to tell himself it was an accident, but he didn't believe it. After all, during their fall, he had done everything he could to deflect the blade from himself by twisting Tatsumichi's wrist back as hard as he could. He felt like he was going to puke. Shia swallowed, holding it down. He lifted his head and looked up at the slope. He tumbled down. Shrubbery covered the slope, blocking his view. He'd left Noriko behind, alone. More than anything else now, he needed to protect her. This was no time to throw up. I have to hurry, he thought, trying to calm down. I have to hurry back to her. Shia stood. From a moment he looked down at Tatsumichi's face and the hatchet he had split him in two. After a brief hesitation, he pried Tatsumichi's fingers from the weapon handle. No matter what had happened, he couldn't leave Tatsumichi like this. A burial was out of the question, but leaving that hatchet buried in his face would have been too cruel. Shia couldn't physically bear it. Shia gripped the handle and pulled. Tatsumichi's head lifted off the hatchet. The blade had dug so deeply that it wouldn't come free. Shia exhaled deeply. Oh, God. Then he thought again. No, where the hell is God in all this? Miano was such a devout Christian, and what did her faith get her aside from being raped by Sakamochi? Well, hallelujah. Rage erupted within him. Gritting his teeth, Shi knelt beside Takamochi's head and placed a trembling hand on his dead classmate's forehead. With his other hand, he yanked out the hatchet. With an ugly spurting sound, blood splayed from the boy's face, and the blade came free. With a second, she was overcome by the feeling that this was all just a bad dream. A left and right halves of Tatsumichi's head had tilted askew. It was too unreal, like a plastic fassa smile. That word I said wrong. For the first time, she realized how fragile and malleable the human body was. Closing Tatsumichi's eyes didn't seem a good idea. Tatsumichi's eyelid, which had been split in two along with the eyeball, had contracted and twisted upward and would never close again. The other eye was manageable, but who would want a winking corpse, especially here? She felt sick again. Instead, he stood and turned. To get back at Noriko, he'd have he'd have to take the long way around up the trail. But his eyes shot open wide again. 15 meters up in front of him, in the middle of the field, stood a boy with glasses and a school jacket. Kiyoichi Motobuchi, boy number 20, and the boy's class leader. And the class leader was holding a revolver. 30 students remain. Yeah, and sorry to leave it there on a cliffhanger. Typically I would go a little bit further, but my eyes are very tired all of a sudden, and I'm like trying to not fall asleep. So, that's chapter 17. And, yep, nope, that's still frozen. Fine. Jesus Christ. Yeah, so that was chapter, we're gonna be, I ended it at chapter 17. So it's a little bit less than what I have been doing lately, but really tired. Oh, I really don't understand about all of a sudden I'm really tired. My eyes hurt. Alright, I'm gonna go to bed. I mean, to be fair, it's 2 o'clock. So, I mean, it's sort of late. Not really as late as I could go to bed, but I mean, late-ish. But, shit, bounce balls in the way. Fuck, bounce ball. Oh no, Hide. Hide from Tokyo Ghoul. You stay right there. Okay, anyway. Alright, so anyway, alright, night, and, see you guys maybe tomorrow if I want to read some more. But, alright, you have a good night.